Jon Morosi, MLB Network insider, joins us this morning. John, the Yankee Stadium's kind of sleepy and quiet this time of year, is it not?
Yes, it is. Ailish and Justin, good morning. It is not exactly the powerhouse Yankees that we have come to expect. Obviously, the Jays will still get a glimpse of Garrett Cole in this series, which will maybe conjure images of when they were a more formidable foe. But this team, and this is where, given where the Jays are right now, this is a series that you have to win. So I realize that the Yankees and Yankee Stadium maybe are not as vaunted as they once were, but a very good start to the series last night nonetheless.
Yeah, it definitely was. I mean, from a Blue Jays standpoint, I don't know if we want to put these wins in the bank just yet, but unless it's Garrett Cole, I think you're definitely going to favor the Blue Jays with that atmosphere against a team that looks just inferior, flat out, at this point. And it's weird seeing the Yankees like this, right? Like, I don't know how long they're going to sit on their hands and wait for something to happen, wait for guys who may or may not be anything to actually have an impact on this team. So what do you expect in the offseason from them? Like, I don't know if Cashman's going, I don't know if Boone's going, but it doesn't matter unless you have an injection of talent, I would think. Is Trout an option? Ohtani? Like, are they going to go out there and make something happen this offseason?
Well, it's a really important question, and certainly for the Yankees and the pressure that they're under, I think we have to remember a couple things. Number one, they did go out and hand out the largest free agent contract in baseball last offseason in Aaron Judge, and then one of the largest pitching contracts too with Carlos Rodon. And certainly Judge, when healthy, has been basically the player that he was a year ago. He's got 32 homers in 97 games, which if you project that over a full season, gets him into the high 50s. So Judge has been Judge when healthy. And then Rodon obviously has been a disappointment. And I think that, to me, is one of the most important things to point out is just when you spend that amount of money into the nine figures, and Rodon has given them 3 wins and an ERA close to 6. It's just really hard, even if you're the Yankees, to overcome that. They've had a number of different issues, obviously, with their rotation. Guys who have missed time to injury. Herman, of course, has taken a leave. So there's a lot of different reasons why they've been so inconsistent. But we talk about Trout, and I do think, as the Angels have acknowledged at least privately, and it's been reported that they'll entertain the possibility of moving Trout, which is big news. I mean, Mike Trout is still Mike Trout, but you think about how often he has played, and the Yankees' issues of a lack of reliability with their star players, and with Mike Trout playing 82 games this season after playing 36 games 2 years ago, and he's now getting up into his 30s. He's 32 years old. He's under contract through 2030. I'm just not sure if that's the play that you want to make in terms of adding that much payroll for someone who's been pretty inconsistent. Do you bet on Cody Bellinger's big year and sign him, bring him back? Of course, he's the son of a former Yankee. At the end of the day, what I see with this team is the group of young players who have come up, and to much fanfare, whether it's Anthony Volpe or Oswald Peraza, Oswaldo Cabrera, Jason Dominguez was up for a week and then injured. When you rely on young players this much because your veterans are getting hurt and aren't producing, the young players got to be able to deliver right away, and that hasn't been the case. So there's a gap where this next wave of talent should be. They tried to spend a bunch last offseason. I'm not sure if the unfulfilling contract for Carlos Rodon, if the remedy for that is just spend more money, because it really seems like the infrastructure of this team is not as sound as it should be.
You can't feel sorry for the Yankees, but I kind of feel sorry for the Yankees. I mean, they just feel like they're in a pretty dark spot. But enough about them. The Toronto Blue Jays have the 3rd best record in the American League. This after getting swept last week by the Texas Rangers. It's almost unfathomable that they've turned things around so quickly here. And it's not just them. I mean, things happening around them. But I don't know what to make of the fact that the Blue Jays have the 3rd best record. I don't know what to make about the last week, because clearly they played a good team and were embarrassed, and now they've beat up on what used to be good teams, but now are bad teams. So what do you make of the last week for the Toronto Blue Jays? Have we learned anything? And are they really the 3rd best team in the American League?
Well, they are right now on record, and I think that one thing I'll point out that has happened in the last week, we talk so much, whether it's the NHL playoffs or this time of the baseball season, your best players need to be your best players. And look at Vladdy over the last week. He's got an OPS above 1,000. He's hit 3 homers. That's at the risk of oversimplifying a very nuanced 6-month season. Vladdy has played like an all-star again for the last week, and look at what's happened. It's remarkable what he does to lift the entire lineup. And I think offensively they've gotten some good support. Varsho has been better of late. Kirk has had some better at-bats as well. Chapman's return, I think, has made an impact. I know that overall numbers aren't there, but they look more like themselves. And it's funny. I think I was on the radio last week in Seattle. It might have been on the same day that I talked with you on the show. And the Mariners, of course, are their focus. And the host said, well, how confident should the Mariners be? And basically, I said, well, I was just on the Fan 590 this morning, and I was given assurances based on what everybody said. The Jays are not going to win another game this whole year. They're totally done after the series against Texas. And look at how they've played since then. That's the beauty of baseball. It turns right around for you. So I think what we've seen with this team, if anything, while it feels like a dramatic turn, it has actually affirmed everything that I think we've talked about all season long, which is the pitching is going to be there. And obviously, last night, a bit of a nervous moment there with the early exit for a starting pitcher. But when the pitching is there and consistent, you just need a little bit of offense, and you're going to be just fine. And over the last week, or at least since the Rangers series, they've had good pitching and just enough offense, and they've been just fine. And so when they play like this, they are, as you point out, very clearly the third best team in the American League.
You're not alone on the roller coaster of Blue Jays emotions and takes. So, that account, Freezing Cold Takes, could have had a couple of our quotes over the last little while. But Blue Jays keep it interesting. How about that, John? We're talking to Jon Morosi, MLB Network insider. I want to ask you about Shohei Ohtani. So underwent a successful elbow surgery on Tuesday. So ending his season, of course, we knew that. But looks like he'll be ready to hit starting opening day of 2024, but won't pitch until 2025. Now, obviously, the big question is how this impacts his impending free agency, also impacts what kind of contract we might be looking forward to him signing, or maybe waiting to sign a monster one. How do you think this unfolds for Shohei this offseason?
Hey, it's just really for me a fascinating question, because I look at this team and what the Angels might do with him, obviously going to the offseason, and what Shohei is wanting to do. And I look at the signals here over the last couple of weeks, the surgery that he had, obviously by the Dodgers team physician. File that note away as you think about that going forward. But for me, it looks like there may be a deal. There's one or two paths for him. Either he goes with a 2-year deal and 2-year deal only. I want just the best 2-year deal I can sign that allows me to hit only in 24 and then do both in 25 and then re-enter the open market as a true unfettered free agent after 2 years. You could do that. Or you could have the longer-term deal that allows you to opt out, which is sort of the very en vogue process. Or, I guess the third option is you have a guaranteed 2-year deal that becomes the longer-term deal if you hit a certain number of starts in 2025. That would be the more club-friendly iteration of this idea. The player-friendly iteration of it is give them the 8 years or 10 years and then include the opt-outs that basically make it very risky for the team, or where the team assumes all the downside risk of, let's just say for the sake of argument that, and nobody wants this, but if the surgery doesn't work out as well from a pitching perspective, then basically you're stuck paying a DH $40 or $50 million a year, and that doesn't really make a lot of sense, no matter how famous the DH is. So it is, Ailish, I think one of the more, it is the most fascinating off-season story that I have ever encountered in my career covering baseball for a couple decades. And it's going to be so interesting because at the end of the day, I think the one thing that we've seen with Shohei is that obviously the money will be important on some level, but it's never been the sole motivating factor for him. He came over to the Angels and he left a ton of money on the table. If he just waited 2 more years, he could have made a huge sum of money on his entry contract, and that wasn't really what he was trying to do. He was trying to make the greatest impact that he could, to go to a place where he could hit and pitch, and he's done that. And now I think he wants to go to a place where he can get healthy and has the best-in-class rehabilitation process behind him. Again, I'll mention it was the Dodgers team physician who did the surgery. I still think that where this thing was 3 months ago when he was at the peak of his powers was, you know what, there's probably a pretty good chance he signs with the Dodgers. And here we are in the late days of September, one surgery later, it's probably still a pretty decent chance he signs with the Dodgers. At the end of the day, that it's both the most obvious and probably the most likely outcome here, given all the things the Dodgers can offer. And the most important thing they offer, Ailish, is that they win. They win every single year. And I think Shohei is done with complicated teams that have older players and are sort of incoherent in the way that they're going about things. So that, to me, says no thanks, Angels, no thanks, Padres, no thanks, Mets, no thanks, Yankees. He wants to go to a place where he knows he can win right away. He's done with the rest of the stuff, and that's why I think the Dodgers still have the best chance no matter what the actual contract looks like.
It was funny. We were chatting with Stan Kasten maybe like a week or two ago, and I floated the idea, and he was very tight-lipped, but he didn't say no. He said, well, you know how it is. Rumors percolate, Ailish. I said, okay, we'll see. But, I mean, when you put the cards together, they seem to make sense there for Shohei Ohtani. Chatting with Jon Morosi, MLB Network insider. We'll stick with pitching. Steele and Snell, the NL Cy Young. Last night, Snell with 7 hitless innings, so he's helping keep that race nice and tight. But is there a lean for you? These guys going head-to-head down the stretch, is it going to come down to maybe the last couple outings that they have? Because this is the most interesting Cy Young race, I think, personally.
I agree, and for me, it's Snell right now based on what he's been able to do. He does have just a slight edge in innings pitched over Steele. Obviously, Steele could potentially pass him by here in the coming days. I just think that Snell has been a little bit more dominant. When you look at his strikeout rate, it's off the charts. Strikeouts per 9. You could argue as well. Strider I think still has an interesting case. It's interesting actually. The big picture here. Zach Wheeler leads in wins above replacement among all pitchers. I still think though it's Snell is the choice. This is one of the more wide open NL Cy Young races that I have seen, and so I would give the slight edge to Snell. Steele, though, would be a great choice as well. I don't really think there's a bad answer here. Interestingly, I'll tell you this: I am an American League Cy Young voter this year. I purposely do not really dive in too much on the numbers on the awards that I vote on until really like the last week of the year, because I never want to get any preconceived notion, and of course you're always like sworn to secrecy on what you do with it. So it's fun. I'm kind of looking at the NL side. I'm like, that's a really tough ballot. The American League, you got a couple interesting guys to think about too. But I look across the way there and say, ooh, NL Cy Young, interesting. That's a tough ballot to have. AL MVP, that's a tough ballot to have. Although I think Ohtani probably still wins that one. The Cy Young vote though is going to be interesting. I was once, Ailish, a Detroit-based voter who voted for David Price over Justin Verlander, and that was the single deciding vote in David Price winning it over Verlander. And Ailish, let's say this: you know how competitive Justin Verlander is. I'll leave you with this. Do you think Justin maybe has mentioned this to me a couple times over the years?
Yeah, maybe.
Probably. It has come up, and it's interesting. The yearly awards, the voting is all public. And I remember it was like Thanksgiving week when the vote totals came out, and David won the vote over Justin by, again, one vote. It was the closest vote in the history of the award. And I talked to my late grandfather. I called him. I said, hey, Pap, I think I cost Verlander the Cy Young. And he said, oh, son, don't worry about it. It's a secret ballot, and you voted your conscience, and I'm proud of you, and no one's going to know. I said, actually, Pap, everybody knows, and my phone's blowing up. And so he's like, oh, darn it, John, well, it's okay. You can still come to Thanksgiving. It was pretty funny. But no, it's these awards, that they matter a lot, and it's an honor to have the ballot, and I've got a lot of homework to do here in the next couple of weeks.
And what matters, at least to Snell, is interesting, right? Because he's been, I guess the knock on him is the innings, but you mentioned Steele, still trying to catch him in innings, but they don't push him, right? And he's holding the Rockies hitless, got a no-hitter through 7, right, and they still don't push him. I mean, I don't know what San Diego's playing for, but at this point, why not let him try to complete the no-hitter last night?
Right. It's a fair question. I do wonder if there are guidelines, perhaps through Blake's representation. We all may have heard about him. His name is Mr. Boris from Newport Beach, California, and so there may be in general some guidelines behind what Blake's pitch count should be, and I think for him the goal is to stay healthy and be able to hit the pot of gold this off season. But you're right. I mean, it's a chance at history if they let him keep going. He was okay with it in his comments after the game. I think that was important to hear from Blake. But look at big picture here. The universe of starters who have won a Cy Young in both leagues is very small, and Blake Snell could do it. That's pretty remarkable when you consider his career. We often think back to the World Series in 20, and he was pulled early in that game. We still talk about that years later, but he's had a great season, a great career, and if he enters free agency having won the Cy Young in both leagues, that's going to be a pretty compelling thing for Scott to put on the free agent sizzle reel. It's going to be a really interesting market. You know, you mentioned earlier the Yankees and the Mets with the new president of baseball operations and where they're going. The Dodgers have to get some pitching. The Cardinals have to get some pitching. This is the optimal off season to be a free agent pitcher, and if you get yourself to the market. And again, think about, a couple months ago we would have said, well, everybody's going to wait for Ohtani before anything else happens. Now Ohtani is almost becomes the luxury item that you consider. Maybe he signs later on in the off season, but I think you could see there's a universe in which Aaron Nola and Snell, Giolito, others maybe sign earlier because that part of the market's a little more clarified, and I think Snell's going to be one of the biggest beneficiaries of that.
That's the power of Boris, I guess. I mean, you're a pending free agent, and you're like, you know what? I'll just go maximum twice through the order just to make sure that I don't have any crooked numbers on that. That's
right.
That's pretty good in terms of strategy for the Boris camp. John, are you as offended as we are that Yusei Kikuchi gets 14 hours of sleep before a workday?
To me, I guess I'll say this: if he's able to get that amount of sleep, I'm lucky that if I've got like a 3-day span, and that's how much sleep I get.
Yeah.
No, he's for me, whatever your routine ends up being, I would say this: when he pitches a day game, you start doing the math, and he's probably in bed by the end of the second inning of the previous night's game, which is, hey, he's able to wind down. Sleep, as we've learned, is one of the most important things for all of us, and especially in athletic performance. And we think about hockey and the sanctity of the pregame nap and how important rest is. So I think he's unlocked something that's pretty important. And I say, if you're able to get 14 hours, my friend, more power to you. And I wish I could be more like you.
Last one for you, John. Really nice story in the MLB the other night. Adam Wainwright getting his 200th win after a long time coming. 18 professional seasons, 3 All-Stars, 2 Gold Gloves, a World Series championship, and finally his 200th career win. Obviously one of the biggest competitors and guys that wanted to grind it out, and he finally got that 200th win. What was that moment like? I mean, putting it in perspective, someone that worked so hard to get something of that level and that magnitude, and the team helping him get there.
Yeah, Ailish, it's an awesome story for Adam. Thrilled for him. He's such a first-class guy. He's a former Clemente Award winner, which I think is the most important line of any bio for a player when you think about what he's done off the field and what he's represented in his community. And broadly speaking, he's got a big heart, and he's a great pitcher. I think that if he had ended his career with 198 or 199, I think there would have been a lot of people, heartbroken for him around the game. So to see him, even in a year in which he's not been competitively the guy that he's been for a long time, to find a way that, as he said after the game, to be himself for one more night, that's like for love of the game movie stuff for Adam to do that in a 1-0 game. He's someone that's pitched a number of 1-0 games in his career. For it to be in a 1-0 game, I think just says a lot about him and how perfect he had to be for that amount of time, and the respect on the Brewers side. Just a great story. He was able to pitch for Team USA at the World Baseball Classic this year. After 20 years previously, he was cut from the Olympic qualifying team in 2003. He was able to finally represent his country in that way. It's a storybook ending to his career. And you look at his numbers. I mentioned to Blair and Barker yesterday, it's pretty comparable to what Roy Halladay did. And you don't necessarily think about him in the same category of the dominance of Doc at his peak, but look at the totality of the numbers. He actually has more strikeouts than Halladay did, with a pretty similar ERA, pretty similar win total. For me, I think he's a Hall of Famer, and we're changing obviously the metrics. It's not 300 wins anymore. It's just not realistic. So I'm not gonna hold up Adam Wainwright or CC Sabathia to the standards of Walter Johnson and Christy Mathewson. It's a different game. And I think that Adam has helped define his era, the most frequently utilized battery in the history of the game with him and Yachty. So just a tremendous citizen on and off the field. And you could just tell that the outpouring of support from people around the game for him, how much he's respected within the community of players. So just thrilled for Adam and his family. Great family man. So it was a really, really proud moment, I think, for the game to see Adam get 200.
Yeah, it was really cute to see his son Caleb there on the podium or under the podium.
Yeah,
it was really sweet.
What a great photo that was by Derek Gould. Well done by Derek to get that moment. Just again, he's a proud dad above all else, and so that was a pretty cool thing to see.
Yeah, it was a really nice story in baseball to follow over the last little while, and congrats to him for getting that big, elusive 200th win. John, appreciate you jumping on this morning. Great to catch up, and hopefully we got more Blue Jays baseball to talk about down the road.
Yes, indeed, Ailish and Justin. I can't wait for that. I think we've got some NHL preseason games coming up too. We'll be checking in on how the Wings are looking and how the Leafs are the measuring stick for them. Can they find a way? So we'll be comparing those two teams a lot, I'm sure, this season.
We certainly will be. We'll chat soon with you, John. Thanks so much for getting up for us.
Sounds
Thank
great.
you.
Thanks so much.
Jon Morosi, MLB Network Insider.